45,000 plus new affordable units in Los Angeles goes up all the time. Well, when you actually go and look and say, all right, how many of those had permits pulled? It's less than 5,000. I think most recently it's 2,000 and change actually getting built, because you can't build a 7-story type 3 all studio building on a single family lot and expect it to work. It just will not.
You said your passion for housing started when you saw a homeless in London as a kid. Can you take us back to that moment? What did it mean to you?
Yeah, for sure. One of my earliest memories is being in London with my family, and that's where I was born. While we left London when I was quite young, we would frequently go back. We moved to Hong Kong, and we would always stop in London on the way, either to or from Hong Kong, going back and forth to the United States. And I will always remember this one time where I was leaving the London Tube, the London Underground, with my mom and one of my brothers, and there was a homeless couple sitting on the floor asking for money. It was the middle of the winter, and we were all bundled up. And then all of a sudden, I had this deep rooted pain in my chest and started to tear up. And I felt their pain. And it really just resonated with me in a way that I think at that point in time, I couldn't really understand why I was feeling that. I couldn't really put into words what emotions were coming over me, but I knew that something clicked in me that made me feel for them and want to help. And so I remember going to my mom and asking her if she had any cash or any coins or anything that we could give to them. And she was more than happy to help and gave me the money to bring over to them. And I felt such a sense of I felt like I was doing something right. I was giving, I was being supportive. I grew up in a relatively privileged home. I'd never had to worry about the food on the table or the roof over my head and access to all the activities in schools and things that a boy would want or a child would want. And I just really struck me when I saw people who didn't have the same access that I had. And so, as I mentioned, when we left London, we moved to Hong Kong, and that was in the mid to late 90s. Hong Kong was still kind of going through a transition. And we would also frequently go to mainland China. And I would kind of see just such a wide range of multi-billion-dollar skyscrapers going up next to homes that have either been there for hundreds of years or people living on the street and living in cardboard boxes. And you see that juxtaposition. And at least for me, I thought to myself, how could there be so much wealth and prosperity in this world? And at the same time, there'd be so many people who are in desperate need of just the basic life necessities. And so through kind of those experiences and others kind of put me on the path of how do I address affordable housing? And I moved to Los Angeles about 4.5 years ago. There's really nowhere else in the United States quite like Los Angeles. And what I mean by that, there are many reasons, but one of them is the vastness of the homelessness problem that is here. And it just kind of, again, something clicked and I was like, this is what I need to do. I need to address affordable housing and I'm going to do it in my own backyard.
That's so inspiring. I mean, that's the post that I saw when I approached you. So how did you get into this real estate development? If you go back, like, did something push you into it, or you always wanted to become a real estate developer, or, you just decided right away, like after that incident?
I think we are a product of our experiences. And so there are a few experiences that I have in my life that kind of pushed me towards, I would say, having an affinity towards real estate development. So one of them is that my grandfather on my mom's side was a real estate developer in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up around real estate development and architecture and just kind of the built environment. I was born in London, grew up in Hong Kong, lived in New York City, lived in Shanghai. They're some of the biggest cities in the world. And every month you're seeing a new skyscraper go up. And it's hard to not be inspired and try to kind of figure out what is going on. And why is our built environment being built the way that it is? So my grandfather was kind of one of the reasons for going into real estate development. The other kind of part that inspired me to go into real estate development is I have this desire or this passion around supporting not only my loved ones, but the people around me. And I believe there's no better way to do that than to make sure that people have a roof over their head. There's no way that you can get your life on track if you don't have a roof over your head. And so, kind of just from my upbringing, through inspiration from my family, through kind of growing up in a very unique built environment, that put me on the path to real estate development.
That's so inspiring. You once wrote about helping a young woman during cold winter in New York. How do
Julia,
personal
yeah.
how do personal moments like that drive your mission today?
You know, I will never forget Julia, and I hope that she has found obviously a roof over her head and has found more stability in her life. So one of my first jobs, I was working in New York City. I was working out of 600 Madison on the corner of 58th and Madison. And in the middle of the winter, I walked out one day and I saw this girl no older than her early 20s sitting outside in the winter, no gloves, not really anything to keep her warm, and was just sitting on the side of the street. And I went up and I started chatting with her and I learned her story. And I decided that I was going to try to do whatever I could to make life a little bit easier for her. And so what I did is I gave her some money at that point in time, but then I went home and I went through my closet and I said, okay, what do I have that I could give her to help keep her warm that would be helpful to her? I found a few things, but ultimately I decided I'm just going to go to the store and I'm just going to buy her some things because she needs it. Might as well give her something new. And so I walked to a nearby store and I bought some additional items and just kind of hoped for better or for worse that she was going to be there the next day. Part of you hopes that she's there so you can give her the things. Part of you hopes that she's not there. Maybe she found a place to spend the night or found an opportunity. But she was there and we continued in kind of deep conversation and I provided her those items and she was very grateful. And for the next kind of few months, she was pretty much always outside of 600 Madison and I would bring her some food, give her some money, ask her if she needed anything, and just kind of built this rapport with her. And of course, that makes you feel good about yourself. But I don't do it for the purpose of to make myself feel good. I do it because someone is in need. And if I have the opportunity or the means to help fill part of that need, I almost feel like it's my obligation to do so. And so I continued to kind of support her however I could. And as spring rolled around, one day she was no longer there. And so I don't know if she found a job or if she found a place to live, or maybe she reconnected with her parents that she shared with me, the story there. But I just hope for her and for everyone else who's kind of in similar situations that they find opportunity and that the people who see people in need do what they can to help when they have the means to do so.
You're completely right. We all should do it. If you help somebody, you never know the help is going to come to you in a situation where you are really in need for help. Could be anything.
Do another quick story. So it was probably about 6 months ago. Someone rang my front doorbell and I was not at home, but I have a ring doorbell. And so I answered it. And it was kind of a weird time. It was raining out. It was fairly late in the evening. I wasn't quite sure who would be ringing my bell at that point in time, but I answered the call and someone said, hey, do you happen to have a blanket? And I said, I'm so sorry. I am not home right now. I wish I could help. And they said, okay, thank you. And that was it. I got home about 10 minutes later and I felt like I need to go and find this person. And so I went into my house. I put together a backpack. I got 2 bottles of water. I got some food. I got 2 blankets. I got a bag of popcorn. And I said, I'm going to go and get in my car and I'm going to drive around and I'm going to see if I can find this person. And I spent 30 minutes driving around the neighborhood and I could not find them. And I was really upset. I was like, if only that person rang my doorbell 10 minutes later, I would have been able to help. And so I parked my car in my driveway and I said, you know what? I'm just going to do one more lap around the block on foot. And I went around through the alley and I ended up kind of in a commercial area. And there they were sleeping under a cardboard box. And I went up to them and I just gave them the backpack and kind of just asked them if there was anything else that they needed. And they were beyond grateful. And again, I didn't do that to feel good about myself. I did that because I saw someone that was in need and knew that I had things at home that I wasn't using, that I didn't need. I don't need all the extra blankets. I don't need this popcorn. I can always go get some more popcorn if I really need it. I can always
Right.
get more bottles of water. But they needed it and they needed it right then. And it's little things like that that make you get into bed at night and feel like you did something good today.
True. I completely agree with that. So, Sterling, how did growing up in different countries prepare you to think differently as a developer?
It's an interesting question. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in some of the largest, most bustling cities in the world. And you are surrounded by all different walks of life. You're surrounded by billionaires and you're surrounded by people who just need a piece of bread to make it through the day. But what's really interesting is kind of seeing how the environment gets built around you and to see how there are different needs and how those needs are met by different asset types, different types of construction, different modes of construction, who the players are. And so what was really interesting for me is, especially growing up in a city like Hong Kong, it was it was going through a transition, especially in 1996, 1997, when there was the handover from London back to the People's Republic of China. And there was a massive amount of wealth and there was a lot of investment made into Hong Kong. And it's amazing because the skyline, every time you go and visit a city like that, the skyline's completely different from the last time you were there. And kind of it impacts you because, at least for me, it allowed me to think through and to see all different ways in which different needs are met, different ways things are built, how office design and how office CBDs are designed and where they should be located, where shopping should be, how public transit interacts with everything, the reliance on a car versus being able to walk or take a bus. And so you really kind of see this ecosystem get built, especially in kind of a young city. Obviously, Hong Kong has been around for a very long time, but most of parts of China, if I can call it that, are relatively new. And they kind of had a blank slate in the modern era to build these cities. So I remember going to Shenzhen, which is just outside of Hong Kong, in the early to mid 90s. And it was mostly farmland. There was not much there. You go there now, it's like one of the largest cities in China. And they had this opportunity to design very intentionally for the needs of the people that are there. And so by growing up in all these different cities, old cities, young cities, it really gave me the opportunity to think through kind of smart design and intentional design rather than kind of a little bit of what you're stuck with in certain cities, like let's say New York or Milan, where it's fitting a square peg into a round hole. Those streets, that infrastructure is so cemented in place that it's really hard to redesign the city. It's really hard to, even if you know that this should all be for pedestrians and there should be no cars here, it's very difficult to make that happen given the existing infrastructure. But with intentional design, intentional aesthetics, and really kind of seeing so many different parts of the world be built from the ground up, it really informed my thinking around not building for, or let's say it this way, building for the end user and building very specifically, not for the people that are in the building, but for the surrounding community as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's so incredible. So you've worked on more than 200 deals across housing, retail, and storage. What was the toughest early deal you worked on, and what did it teach you?
Man, well, I'll say this. There hasn't been a single easy deal in my entire career. So when you say toughest, it's really just kind of ranking the degrees of how tough each deal is. I wouldn't say this is one of my earlier deals, but it's one of the deals that I did essentially on my own. I had one partner, but it wasn't with another company. So, I'll tell the little bit of the story here and kind of the learnings from it. So in 2019, I left my previous company and started kind of a small real estate acquisitions and development shop in New York City. And I bought a building in Brooklyn that I was going to redevelop and turn it into co-living. So to address affordable housing, lowercase a, through density, shared housing, and be able to kind of, provide housing for the missing middle that I felt that co-living truly addressed. And so I found this property. I did not have any capital partners. I did not have any equity investors. I put it under contract and I went hard on the deposit and I did not have the equity lined up for it. And I will tell you, there were many, many, many sleepless nights and of just making sure that I could close on it because I couldn't afford to not close on it. I essentially put everything that I had into the deposit on the property. I was very fortunate that I found a wonderful equity partner kind of through my network that I have built, and we closed on the property. And then it was actually fairly smooth sailing for some period of time. We redeveloped the property. We finished 3 months ahead of schedule. We finished under budget, and we entered into a lease, a master lease for the entire property, for the residential portion of the property, with one of the leading co-living operators at the time. And everything was great until it wasn't. And COVID happened, and I fortunately finished the construction, was able to refinance the property, but then one problem after another happened. It was either a tenant issue or a building repair issue, or my lender accidentally mischarged me on a monthly basis for a year for my loan. So all of a sudden did a capital call. And that was right after I made distributions. So I had to figure out how I could get the money to essentially make the bank whole for their error. I then had my master lease tenant essentially go bankrupt, and I had the building with people living in it, but no tenant to essentially pay the rent. So then I had to hire lawyers and make sure I could get the master lease tenant out and find a new tenant to replace them. And I think despite all of those hiccups, approached every problem with, okay, there's a solution. It's going to take some degree of creativity. It's going to take hard work. It's probably going to entail some sleepless nights, but I've been able to get through things that are tougher before. I'll get through this. And through all of those peaks and valleys, and a lot of valleys, the one thing that I did, which I think was the biggest lesson that I took away, was I stayed in constant communication with my capital partners. I let them know everything that was going on. I was transparent about the status of our tenants, the status of any repairs, the status of our relationship with our lender. And we ultimately ended up selling the building about 5 or 6 months ago. It wasn't the financial returns that we hoped for, but despite all of that, we ended up selling the property, and I continue to have a great relationship with those capital partners because I was transparent and I overly communicated with them. And so the main lesson, or the biggest lesson that I take away, is while we all want to do well, and we want to not only do well for ourselves, but do well for the people, for our partners, for our whoever we have fiduciary responsibility to our tenants, whomever whose lives we're touching. If you do well, but you don't communicate, it's almost worse than not doing well and over communicating.
Yeah, that's true. When you're in trouble or when something's going wrong, at least they should know who are involved.
It's all about
It's
trust.
right.
Right. And so if you don't build trust, and you don't build trust through lack of communication, then how are they supposed to believe, or how your partner is supposed to believe that you're doing the right thing by them? You're doing the right thing for the property. You're doing the right thing for the tenants. You're doing the right thing for all stakeholders. And so if you build that trust through communication, whether the news is good or bad, it goes a long way.
True. If they trust you, then they know, okay, whatever he's doing right. Like, so he's thinking about us. Then you don't have to worry about it.
Like, I'm happy to tell you a quick tidbit about one of our
Sure.
earliest deals at Angeleno, if that
Sure.
would be
Good.
helpful, because you asked me about my career at Angel. So when we were first kind of getting going, maybe a year and a half ago, our director of acquisitions was driving around and he saw a for sale sign on a property. And so we called the agent, and the agent said, "Sorry, we can't sell the property because it is tied to the lot next door. This is the owner of the lot that has the for sale sign was foreclosed, and it's the it's the lender trying to sell the property, but we're unable to sell it because it's tied to the lot next door." And we said, that doesn't seem like a problem. We can figure out how to untie these lots. And so we submitted an offer to the bank, or through the broker to the bank. And despite them saying that we don't think we can sell this property, they accepted our offer, and we were in contract in within 24 hours from submitting offer to in contract. And we all kind of looked at ourselves and were like, that was the easiest deal that we have ever done. Lo and behold, it was far from it. So we did go through through the process of untying it from the lot next door. We did get kind of clearance to be able to purchase the property, and the seller, the lender, the former, the bank who owned the property, ability to sell the property. And then about 2 or 3 weeks before closing, all of a sudden liens were placed on the property. There was a mechanics liens like plumber and electrician. And they were liens that were placed that were for work that was done in 2023 and 2024. Well, the property was demolished in 2022. So how is there an electrician putting a lien on the property? And these two liens totaled for about $200,000 right before the property was sold. And we weren't going to close on the property with those liens in place. And so fortunately, the seller had to take on the significant burden of trying to figure out how to get these liens removed and so we could close. But we decided to call the groups that put the liens on the property to ask what was going on. And they said, we can negotiate all you want. Tell me a price that you're willing to pay, and I'll make this all go away. And we said, wow, okay, these are fraudulent. This is just the person who lost the property to the bank is working in cahoots with someone to try to prevent the sale. So hopefully maybe they could purchase the property back from the bank. And we've already spent months in due diligence, tens of thousands of dollars in pre-development expenses, working with design consultants, architects, working with the city, working with expediters. And, unfortunately, we had to walk away, and we walked away from the deal. And it was a great property. There was more nuances to it where there was one property, then the one next door became available. We thought about doing two properties, and the one on the other side became available. We thought about combining it all. But ultimately, we ended up walking away from the property despite having made significant investment in time and money. And what that really taught me is that no matter how good a deal seems, no matter how much hair that you've removed and how much sweat equity or real dollars you put in, ultimately, sometimes the best decision is to just walk away. And we walked away. And fortunately, that would have been our fourth deal that we've purchased. We're now on deal 13, and we have 3 more in escrow. So the opportunity cost wasn't significant. We were able to allocate those dollars to other projects to continue to address affordable housing.
Great. I mean, maybe if you wouldn't have walked away, maybe you would have got into more troubles, and it could have cost you a lot more than it cost you then.
Exactly right.
Great. So you have advised prop tech startups. What's the hardest part of bringing new tech into old school real estate?
Okay. Yeah. Where to begin on this? I mean, this topic, kind of where the common thread that people kind of point to when kind of combining prop tech with real estate is that real estate is slow and it's hard for adoption of technology. I haven't necessarily found that to be the case. I think real estate developers, real estate investors all want to figure out a way in which to bring advances in technology, AI, whatever it might be, to help benefit their portfolio and to help benefit their investors and to benefit their business on the whole. The hardest part, I think, comes from are two things. That is scale. And so we have one, which is scale, and the second one, which is how much meat is left on the bones. And so let's address scale first. Typically when people are thinking about technology, they measure things in terms of eyeballs, right? Instagram and all, how many eyeballs do you get on it? How many users do you get? And you could go from 1 million to 50 million overnight. That's a bit of a hyperbole, but I think it kind of gets the point across. The ability to scale and the cost to scale is marginal. With real estate, there's not many people out there or groups out there that have massive portfolios which would allow you to scale. And even if you did scale across thousands of units, it's still not really that meaningful in terms of the number of people that you are reaching. And so even if you're partnered with some of the largest real estate owners and developers in the world, that gets you in front of X number of thousands of units. That's not really the scale that a technology company needs to justify their growth, to justify their burn, to justify their valuations. And so it becomes really difficult to scale in prop tech. Right. The second thing is what I mentioned is meat on the bones. So real estate developers, they work, they try to have their budgets to be as tight as possible. But a lot of the prop tech companies are catering to property managers, property management firms, and their margins are tiny. And now all of a sudden, if you're saying, hey, I want you to have this additional expense in order to that's going to benefit you in A, B, or C. It's really hard to justify that expense because their operating margins are so small when they're taking 2, 3, 4% property management fees. There's not enough meat left on the bones in the fees that a developer collects or a management company collects to justify the cost of that technology. And even if there are dollars left over to pay for that technology, it's generally not enough to justify the valuations and the burn and the investment that the prop tech company is making. And so those are the two issues that I have found with marrying together traditional real estate development, acquisitions, and investment with prop tech. It's speed of scale and how much real juice is there left to squeeze, and is there enough juice left to squeeze where it makes the financials make sense for both the developer and or property management company as well as a technology company.
Right. I mean, I have felt like, because I've spoken to a lot of people about it, like, and people are hesitant to use technology in real estate, maybe because of the budget as well. We are just dating at the moment, and we're just getting to know each other. So it's not the right time to get tech into real estate.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of dating, not much in terms of marriages, but there are companies that are making investments in the prop tech space that will benefit their portfolio. Again, the issue comes down to scale and the dollars that can justify this investment. I think there are a lot of prop tech businesses out there that are great and have great products and do great for the real estate developers, the property managers, the tenants. The issue is it's hard to justify $1 billion valuation with a product that is so hard to scale.
True. So, what's one skill you think every young developer should learn early, but most don't?
Yeah, for sure. So I started my real estate career. I mean, I had some internships and did a little bit of real estate work throughout college, but my first job out of college was I was a commercial office broker in New York City. And man, I did not like that job. It was not for me. But I will tell you, I truly believe that everyone who wants to get involved in real estate development, acquisitions, investments should start in leasing and perhaps should start in brokerage. And the reason being is that that's leasing, leases, broker, that's the blood of real estate. Obviously, there's a section of real estate like building single family homes where leasing doesn't really matter. And it's just like, what can I build this for and what's going to going to allow me to sell it for? But the office buildings around you, the retail around you, the multifamily buildings, it's all fundamentally driven by leasing. And so if you do not know how to read a lease, negotiate a lease, understand how it impacts the cash flow of the real estate developer, understand how it relates to any underlying lending that's going on at the property, you don't really understand what's going on behind the scenes. I think it's really easy to get enamored by the sexiness or the glam of looking at, you know, high-rise luxury buildings and incredible malls and shopping centers and hotels and say, I just want to build that. But if you don't really understand what's driving that, what allows you to build that, which are the leases and the tenants and the cash flow, it's really hard to wrap your head around real estate development.
What a great advice. So, let's talk about challenges in affordable housing. So, I've read LA needs about 456,000 new homes by 2029, but it's only 20,000 are being built per year. So, why is there's a big difference?
Well, Los Angeles is just not and has not been building enough housing to meet the demand. Los Angeles is, I think, 70+% zoned for single family homes. There's incredible sprawl and there's a lot of demand here for people who want to live here, who want to work here, who want to raise their families here. Given the zoning restrictions, given the kind of other pieces of the puzzle that make it very prohibitive to build here, it makes it very challenging to keep up with the demand. Now, Los Angeles has pulled a few levers that allow groups like Angeleno to go through and develop more density to address affordable housing. But that number that you cited, that's assuming, the situation doesn't get worse,
Yeah.
right? And all signs point to it's not getting better. And so there's a big gap. There's a really big gap. Obviously, it's led some people to leave the city of Los Angeles. But in the end of the day, Los Angeles is always going to be a desirable place to live. There's jobs, there's great climate, there's great opportunity for just a healthy lifestyle. People want to live here in Southern California. And without some significant change to how we build and what we build, it's always going to lag. The supply is always going to lag the demand.
Right. You said the most important thing is, does it actually get built? Why do so many projects, they die on paper and never reach a construction?
For sure. Well, I will speak specifically to ED1, Executive Directive 1 here in Los Angeles, and what has driven the most recent wave of affordable housing, which is the program that we're primarily using for our projects. So ED1 came out in about 2022. It was Executive Directive 1 by Mayor Karen Bass. And the idea here was, how do we empower private real estate developers to build privately funded 100% affordable housing? And what they did is they removed a lot of the barriers that make entitlements very expensive and cumbersome, expedited that process, and in combining ED1 with other state and city incentives allows you to maximize density and essentially take a site where you otherwise would have been able to build 10 homes and build 50, 60 homes. The issue why most of them do not get built is because they're not designed correctly. And so, we try to be very cognizant not only of the being mindful of the aesthetic of the building and how it fits within the fabric of the neighborhood, but being mindful of the size and being mindful of the location. And so a lot of people, when ED1 first came out, they took advantage of ED1. And so what do I mean by that? People bought single family zoned lots, small lots, to build a 7-story tower in a single family neighborhood filled with 100 studios, almost micro studios, where their goal was, I'm going to lease these up with no parking to Section 8 voucher holders. I'm going to be able to essentially get market rents. And on a site that I was normally able to build 10 homes, now I'm building 100. And even though I have single family homes all around me, I'm going to build this 7-story skinny tower. Well, it looks great on paper. The revenue flies off of the page. But once you start actually peeling back the layers of the onion and you're like, wow, 7 stories, type 3 construction is very expensive to build. Building 100 studios, while the revenue looks great, the leasing and the maintenance of studios is very prohibitive. People don't really want, especially Section 8 voucher holders, where there are no studio vouchers. Everyone has at least a 1-bedroom voucher, but then you have to make the decision to go into a studio. People don't want them. There's high turnover, there's high vacancy, there's a lot of repairs and maintenance. And so while on paper, maybe it looks great, you're going to have a hard time raising equity for those projects. You're going to have a hard time finding a debt provider, a construction loan provider, and it's going to be even a harder time to find a takeout lender on the back end. And so ultimately, what we're seeing a lot of in Los Angeles, I think 45,000 plus units, it goes up all the time, that went through the planning and got vested of this is 5,000 new affordable projects. Well, 45,000 new affordable units. Well, when you actually go and look and say, all right, how many of those had permits pulled? It's less than 5,000. I think most recently it's 2,000 and change. So a fraction of the units are actually getting built, because you can't build a 7-story type 3 all studio building on a single family lot and expect it to work. It just will not.
Yeah, you actually answered my other question I was about to ask. Executive Directive Fund, they promised 35,000 affordable units, but only approved 2,000. So what went wrong?
Well, they've approved a lot more than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the permits being pulled are only for a few thousand, which tells you that developers either were hoping to build these and then either realize that it doesn't work, or a lot of folks, essentially land developers, bought the land, entitled them, and then try to sell them RTI, meaning permits ready to issue. So thinking that they can get a nice bump up on the land basis for the projects that are permitted. But that we look at projects every day, tens of projects, hundreds of projects over the course of a month. And we get sent RTI projects all the time. And it's the same thing over and over again. Type 3, all studios in a low resource area with no parking, no access to public transportation. And you said this just will not work. So I think people got a little too excited about the possibility of what they could build with ED1, but didn't take it that step further and say, just because I could, does that really mean that I can?
Right. I mean, as we were talking about it, like, all these problems. So if you could have, if you get a chance to, change one city policy tomorrow to speed up the affordable housing, what would it be?
Oh man, that's a great question because there's plenty of things that I would like to change. I would say that the city has done quite a good job, at least from our perspective, when we're kind of thinking what's our sweet spot for building through ED1 and now AHIP, or the affordable housing part of CHIP that came out this past March, has done a good job to incentivize private developers to build 100% affordable housing. I would say the biggest kind of hurdle that we currently face is, while the city has promised entitlements and approvals on a certain timeline, that promise doesn't really hold too much weight. And so we kind of were originally anticipating that it was going to be 8 or 10 months to get our projects fully entitled, which is incredibly fast for the city of LA. It's going longer than that on some of our projects, and it's okay. It's still very fast for the city of LA, but I still think there is some red tape that can be removed. And I think the city just needs to be better at communicating interdepartmentally. So certain things get approved by planning or by the fire life safety, but they don't really communicate well with each other. And so if there was better communication and there was a little bit more done to help expedite the entitlement process, I think that would help push affordable housing even further.
Great. So Angeleno built MICA. Is it
Micah.
right? Mica.
Yeah.
So your acquisition platform. So how does it give you an edge compared to other firms? Sure.
Sure. So we call it MICA, our market intelligence competitive advantage. And what we sought out to do was, how do we utilize technology, large data sets, AI, to drive our acquisitions and to drive our understanding of what's going on in the marketplace. Typically, when acquisitions happen, you have relationships with brokers. They maybe know your buy box, you're getting flyers, you're looking on some listings online, and you find something that maybe could be interesting. And then you have to kind of dig in and do your due diligence and find out, does it meet this need? Does it meet that need? Is it in the right zoning? Does it have the right setbacks? And we said, rather than taking the approach of someone sends us a site, let's see if it checks our box. What if we flip that on its head and say, this is our buy box. Give us every site that meets it. So what we did is we built out this platform that allows us to scour every single lot in the city of Los Angeles and break it down by a plethora of different categories. So it could be what's existing on the property, when was the last time it sold, what's the zoning, what are the setbacks, where are the power lines located, what's the current tenancy like, what are the lot dimensions, and so on and so forth, and say, okay, we want to target this neighborhood. This is a high resource area. It's in a preferred parking district. So all of our tenants, we try to provide as much parking as possible to the extent that we can on our properties, but to the extent that it's not 1-for-1, which is not required through our program, we want to make sure that there's sufficient street parking. So we target areas that have preferred parking districts. So we say we want to target this neighborhood. It's high resource. It's in a preferred parking district. Our prototype, we need lots that are at least 60 by 150 with this zoning that have this structure on it. Go. And then within a second, we have every lot in that neighborhood that meets our buy box criteria. So then we empower our acquisitions team to be able to go out, contact those owners, contact brokers who maybe had those sites previously listed and they didn't sell, and really have a much more targeted approach to our acquisitions. The other benefit to MICA is not only giving us intelligence about all the properties that are in LA, but it's also giving us intelligence on all the players in LA. So through pulling together all of these large data sources, we're able to know every project that's going on in LA, every permit, the details to them, who is the owner, who's the architect, who are the design consultants. And so we make sure that we know and not only know by name, but we know personally everyone who's doing something in Los Angeles that is of interest or beneficial to us. So we see that there is a civil engineer that's doing 6 projects that are very similar to our types of projects. We want to know them and we want to meet them, and we're going to take them out to coffee. We're going to invite them to an Angeleno event just so we make sure that every player in the space, developer, design consultant, architect, broker, we know who they are and they know who we are. And what that has allowed us to do is, despite kind of our targeted approach of finding properties that meet our buy box, we're also kind of the first call for every major land broker in the city of Los Angeles who has a site and knows our buy box. Most of our deals, maybe besides 1 or 2, we have bought off market because we built such strong relationships with the brokerage community here that we're their first call. And we generally, if the site works for us, we tie it up before anyone has even had a chance to see it.
Great. You said you don't need to chase 100 deals to win one. You just need to see what others don't. What do most developers miss?
What most developers miss goes back to the previous conversation or the previous topic about designing things that ultimately will not get built. And so we've really had to triangulate the right location with the right product type, i.e. the right type of construction with the right kind of market dynamics. And so what I find what a lot of developers are missing is maybe they figured out their exact sweet spot for what they were going to build, but they're doing it in the wrong location that it won't get they either won't achieve the rents that they're looking for, or they're not going to get the kind of community support that they're looking for. Or maybe they found the right location and they know the right product for that space, but they don't know how to build that product. And so ultimately, what I think developers are missing is they have or other developers have, let's say it's a 10-piece puzzle. They have the majority of all of them, but if you don't have all 10 pieces and you don't have all those 10 pieces down cold, you can't finish the puzzle.
You're right. Do you have this edge because you have done your, master's in architecture? Does that help you think differently as a developer?
It does help me think differently. I didn't finish my master's in architecture. I'm still in the middle of it, and I'm going to finish it when time permits. But it did allow me to bridge the gap that I think is so prevalent between real estate developers and architects, where a developer ultimately is driven by the P&Ls of the project. And the architect, of course, wants to design something that is pretty and has aesthetic appeal. And sometimes those two don't marry well. And so it's allowed me to bridge that gap of understanding the design element while also understanding what we need to achieve in order to make this project work. But ultimately, I don't think that's what's giving us our full edge. Before Brandon and I launched Angeleno, we worked together for 6 months just to see if there was a true business here on the affordable housing side. We met with 36 architects. We met with city officials. We met with civil engineers, structural engineers. We met with 24 general contractors. We met with land use attorneys. And we just spent months and months and months digging deep into where are the right locations, what's the right product type, who are the right parties to have involved, what type of relationships do you need before we submitted a bid on our first project. And to go back to what we said earlier, I think especially when ED1 first came out, a lot of people were like, I have this site, or I can buy this site and it's fairly inexpensive. And instead of building 10 units on it, I'm going to build 70 units on it and it's going to be great. They didn't do their homework. And if you don't do your homework, you can't pass the exam. And we did a lot of homework before we sat down to take the test.
Right. Do you think more developers should work closely with architects, or is that too rare in the industry?
Of course, I definitely think that developers should work more closely with architects. Ultimately, you can't build without the architect, and the architect doesn't have a job without the developer. I do think, you asked me earlier, what is an important skill for someone to have? when going into real estate. And I mentioned, really truly understanding leasing. But I do think if I could add to that or supplement that with the more you can understand of all the tangential trades or occupations that touch what you need to do as a real estate developer, the better off you're going to be as a real estate developer. So understanding architecture, understanding construction, understanding even as something as how does landscape get done and what's the requirements for for landscaping. Those are all important skill sets to have that not only allow you to bridge the gap between yourself as the developer and those other parties, but also allows you to approach real estate development just with a more solid knowledge base and a deeper understanding of what it really takes to build something that is actually ultimately going to get built and is going to be a financial success.
Great. Some people say AI will replace people in real estate, from brokers to even developers. Do you see AI as a threat or an opportunity?
I definitely see AI as an opportunity. A lot of the narrative has been AI is going to replace. I think AI is going to supplement, and that if you don't embrace AI and you don't do what you can to make sure that you have a skill set in utilizing AI, whether it's something like ChatGPT or something a lot more nuanced that's specific to your industry, you're going to be left behind. And so obviously there are going to be certain roles that are going to be, whether you could say erased or they're going to be changed due to the utilization of AI. I ultimately think that it's going to be and it already is a very powerful tool that is going to be able to make everyone even better at what they do.
Right. So, how do you see AI changing real estate development from design to financing to operations?
Yeah, I'll try to answer this, but parts of it are probably above my pay grade. So I will answer it to the best extent that I possibly can, and at least how it relates in my work. So I think that one of the places where AI is going to have tremendous impact from real estate development is on site feasibility. So as I mentioned to you, that deal that we ended up walking away from, we spent tens of thousands of dollars working with our architect and working with the city and understanding massing plans and zoning studies. That's pursuit capital, and we had to essentially, we had to walk away from it. But there's an opportunity for AI to look at a site, take public data, give you everything that you need to know about the property from easements and setbacks and power line locations, and then pull together using this assembly bill or that state bill or this executive directive and give you a massing study or a development study on that site and allow you to essentially do a feasibility without having to go out and hire all those third parties and spend all of that time. And that will just allow you to look at more deals, find better deals, and ultimately take the money that you have, because cash is king, and put it into deals that are actually going to get built and not burn it on pursuit cost.
Right. I mean, that's a good point of view. So, you've said your father taught you most important business lessons. What's one you use every day at Angeleno?
For sure. So my father is one of my many heroes that I have, and I had the privilege of working with my father for a few years before moving out to Los Angeles. And I got to sit next to him every single day and learn from him, watch him in meetings, tag team meetings together, which was the highlight of those 4 years. But what my father showed me that has resonated with me and stuck with me throughout my day, and it's not just in my professional life, but it's also in my personal life, is to lead with empathy and understand that every time you go into a conversation, whether it's with a third party, someone across the table from you where you're trying to negotiate a deal, or it's a coworker, or it's your spouse, the most important thing you can do is show up with empathy, show up with compassion, and show up with a desire for everyone to win, because there's no winning if only one side has won. You want everyone to walk away from a conversation, from a negotiation, from a one-on-one with their manager, feeling like they're coming away empowered, feeling like they're coming away that they've learned something, coming away feeling like that was a productive and a useful interaction. And so if you lead with empathy, if you lead with compassion, if you listen more than you speak, you will end up kind of building really meaningful and trusting relationships throughout all different facets of your life.
Well, how do you bring community voices into projects before design is even drawn?
For sure. I mentioned earlier that we really try to be mindful of aesthetic, to be mindful of size, and to be mindful of the neighborhood. Unlike the other folks that I mentioned that are building 7 stories, 8 stories on a single family zoned lot in a single family neighborhood, we try to work within the fabric of that neighborhood and understand the needs of that neighborhood. We're the tallest building we're doing is 4 stories, and they're generally next to other 2, 3, or 4 story properties. We try to be cognizant of the neighborhood parking and build as much parking on our site as is financially feasible. We try to be mindful of the aesthetic and not try to have our properties stick out like a sore thumb compared to the kind of the overall aesthetic and design of and the fabric of the neighborhood. But we also just build close relationships with the neighbors and the community members, making sure that they're very aware of who we are, what we're building, and if they ever have a question or a concern or a comment, that they have the ability to reach out to us directly. And the last part I'll add is, we're building across the entire city of Los Angeles, everything from in the Valley and Reseda, Van Nuys to North Hollywood and East Hollywood, and then throughout other parts of the city. And we always try to the extent that we can, hire local labor and be able to empower people who are in that neighborhood who have the skill sets for what we're looking to build, being able to join us.
Great. So developers often they're seen as chasing profits at all cost. So how do you balance purpose with profit?
For sure. For what we are building, for our 100% affordable housing projects, they are an attractive investment, assuming that you can build it generally on budget and on schedule. And so I think a lot of the times when developers are kind of framed as chasing profit for no matter what, it's taken out. They're primarily kind of put into the bucket of people who are displacing current residents, who are not building affordable housing, who are not taking into account the local community and the fabric of the neighborhood, and putting up a luxury skyscraper in a place that's going to just drive up real estate taxes, is going to make the area less affordable for the people that already live there. For us at Angeleno, we've been able to kind of thread that needle between compassion and capitalism, if you want to call it that, where we we are able to develop 100% privately funded affordable housing that is an attractive investment to our capital partners, while also benefiting the local community and addressing the affordable housing need in LA. And so I think that we are fortunate that we are in a position that we don't get, at least knock on wood so far, kind of bucketed in with kind of the other developers who the ethos around them, or at least the narrative around them, is chasing profit over compassion.
Great. So many believe affordable housing only works with heavy government subsidies. What do you say is not true?
So this goes back to the earlier point regarding ED1 and AHIP and other state bills and assembly bills that are available here in California and in Los Angeles. I believe, and what we are seeing, is that you do not need city, state, or federal financial subsidies to make affordable housing work. You do need city, state, and federal incentives to make affordable housing work. It goes back to my earlier comment of, if we were building 100% market rate housing on some of our projects, we would only be able to fit in 6, 8, maybe 10 units if we were lucky. With the incentives that we're given through doing 100% deed restricted affordable housing, we're able to fit 30, 50, 85 units on a property that otherwise you would not be able to, which significantly drives down the basis in the land on a per unit basis and makes the deals financially work. Now, that being said, you also have to keep in mind that we're not doing these 7-story, 8-story towers, type 3 construction where they wouldn't work, at least from our perspective. You really got to kind of find that intersection between building what is right for the neighborhood, building what financially works, and taking advantage of all the incentives that are given to you. And not just because you have the ability to build a much taller building with many more units doesn't mean that you should. And so, to your question, no, you don't need to do LIHTC or other forms of financial subsidies to make affordable housing work, but you need the city to empower the private real estate development community to be able to do things that otherwise they would not be able to do through restrictive zoning or other land use issues. And that's what ED1 and AHIP have allowed us to do.
Great. So looking 5 to 10 years ahead from now, what could affordable housing, in Los Angeles look like?
Yeah, well, I believe that there's going to be a significant increase in the number of affordable units. It's going to be an incredible challenge to have the supply keep up with the demand. Pretty much impossible, but we at Angeleno are doing everything we can to chip away at that. Our goal is that by the 2028 Olympics, when Los Angeles is on the global spotlight, that we will have hit or passed 2028 affordable units in the city of Los Angeles. And as you mentioned, there's 456,000 or so needed. 2028 doesn't seem like a lot, but every unit that we build is another family or an individual with a roof over their head and the opportunity to pursue their passions and their careers and the opportunity to raise their children in an environment that is safe, convenient, and comfortable.
Great. You just mentioned Olympics. So you were a water polo team player and captain in
You
college.
did your homework.
So you were a captain of water polo team in your college. Did sports shape the way you lead in real estate?
That's a really interesting one. So, I'm not generally the most sporty or athletic person at this stage in my life. I do find that playing water polo and being on the swim team back in college and in high school allowed me to understand how to work better as a team, how to communicate, and how to lead. So it has had some impact on my professional career. But I do have to say that Angeleno's CEO and my business partner, Brandon, he was a collegiate quarterback, and he has an uncanny ability to lead and to lead with empathy and to listen and to really be able to bring a team together. And so while it has had some impact on my career development, I can truly see that people who are raised in an environment around being team oriented and working together, because you are never as good as you alone are never as good as the people that you are with as a team, that does provide a lot of positive impact to people's ability to lead and to have a successful career.
Great. So you have closed 9-figure deals. What's the craziest or funniest story you have had on a project?
Man, the craziest or funniest story I've had on a project. That's a hard one. I feel like I've lost so much hair and so many gray hairs that it's so many things. It's difficult to think of aspects that were funny about it. I'll answer that question slightly differently and kind of give you a little bit of a story about my first role in real estate. So when I was in college, I was fortunate to get an internship that was based in Shanghai. And I worked for a real estate developer that had an office in Shanghai, but was working on a project in Korea. That project was an entire city from the ground up. We were building, or they were building, everything from office buildings, residential, multifamily, single family, retail, convention centers, golf courses, all from the ground up. And it's really hard to go from working on a project like that, where you're traveling between Shanghai and Korea and working on all different facets of, bringing in private schools and someone to operate the golf course and, people to lease up the office building to, working in New York City and then buying a 4-unit above retail multifamily building in Brooklyn. So I would say, it's hard to compete with that. It was a really eye-opening experience. I wouldn't say there was aspects about it that were very funny or humorous. Of course, there were certain meetings or certain conversations that I had that will that I'm going to keep private, but that will continue to stay with me for the rest of my life. Um, but that was truly uh, a humbling and a once in a lifetime experience to be able to work on a project that was just so massive and with the goal of impacting the lives of hundreds of thousands of people.
So you lived in London, Hong Kong, Shanghai, New York, and Los Angeles. Which city has the best food and which has the worst?
Man, okay. Um, which city has the best food? So I will have to say that New York probably has the best food, though Los Angeles has the best quality ingredients. The produce in LA is, you can't beat it. I mean, it's grown right here and it's fresh and it's not sitting in the city air or on cargo ships, and it doesn't really get better. But the chefs in New York and the quality of the cooking in New York is can't be beat. And now I'll say the worst. I'm going to say the worst, but I'm going to give an asterisk. I'm going to say the worst is London, but I also have not been back to London in 15 plus years. And so I cannot speak to how it is now, but based off of my memory, which gets worse and worse every day, I would put New York at the top and London at the bottom.
So if your daughter listens to this podcast 20 years from now, what do you hope she hears in how you approach your work and life?
Yeah, for sure. So, I hope she notices that my work isn't really about the buildings, it's about the people. And that I've spent my career trying to make it easier for families in Los Angeles to be safe, to have an opportunity to really pursue their dreams, have an affordable place to call home, and trying to create a world in which everybody has access to or deserves a chance to pursue what they're passionate about and to be able to have a roof over their head, to be able to have food on the table for their children. And so every project, every unit that we build is just a way to make this city fairer and more welcoming. And the work that I do is bigger than myself. It's it's for everyone who wants to call themselves an Angeleno, and that through whatever you do in your career, if you lead with empathy and you treat people with compassion and you just do your best to make whatever you touch or what you work on to be the best that it possibly can be, that's all you can ask for. So, in summary, though I'm a real estate developer, my career is not about the buildings I build. It's about the people that I impact and the lives that I touch.
Beautiful. So before we move into our last segment, rapid fire, one last question is about AI. So as someone rooted in purpose, where do you draw the line between using AI and keeping the human touch in real estate?
Man, that's a loaded question. I can't say that I have definitively drawn a line in the sand about where one should end and the other one should start. I am all for innovation. I am all for trying to make this world a better place. I'm also all for making sure that people have opportunities and jobs and the ability to put food on their table and have a roof over their head. And so I can't give you a definitive answer of like, this is where AI should absolutely stop and this is where humans should take over. But I do believe that if we embrace advances in technology and we embrace AI and we try to figure out how to work with it rather than against it, it's not us versus them, but it is, let's use this as a tool to empower us. We will make the world a better place. We will make the world a more affordable place for people to live, and will allow people to have the freedom to explore their world in any way in which they want.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Let's move to our last segment. That's rapid fire.
Alrighty.
One book that changed your life.
Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Favorite city you've lived in.
Hong Kong.
One food you could eat every day.
Pizza.
If you weren't in real estate, what job would you want?
I think I would have been I probably an architect.
First thing you do when you wake up.
I look at my wife and I look at my child.
Beautiful. Favorite podcast or show right now?
Favorite podcast or show right now? I know this is rapid fire, but I'm trying to think of my favorite show right now is It just actually the 5th season just started this week, which is Only Murders in the Building, which is takes place in New York City, and there's a little bit of a nostalgia there for me, but I also think it's a wonderfully done murder mystery show.
So most used app on your phone.
Most used app on my phone, this is gonna sound ridiculous, but it's probably the calculator.
Great. Dream vacation spot.
Dream vacation spot, probably the coast of Italy, which my wife and I, uh, are fortunate enough to frequent because my wife is from Italy, and so when we go and see family and friends there, we always take time to decompress by the seaside in Tuscany, and it's hard to beat that.
One word your friends would use to describe you.
Empathetic.
Sneakers or dress shoes.
Sneakers.
What's one song that always pumps you up?
That always pumps me up. This is not gonna sound like a pump up song, but the song "Let It Be" by the Beatles has a really deep place in my heart, and it's kind of a little bit of a mantra that I live by day in and day out. I actually have a "Let It Be" tattoo on my arm, and my wife also has a "Let It Be" tattoo, and whether it's about getting amped up or whether I'm going through a difficult time, that song resonates throughout me in everything that I do.
If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
I would have dinner with my grandfather, the one who I mentioned earlier, was a real estate developer. He passed about a decade ago, and he is also one of my life heroes.
Best advice you have ever received in one sentence.
Lead with empathy, lead with compassion, and listen more than you speak.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was it. Before we close, if somebody from our audience or people, investors, developers, or, anyone wants to contact you, where they can reach out to you.
For sure. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also go to our website, www.angeleno.com, Angeleno.com, hit the contact us, and I will get it.
Great. Thank you so much, Sterling. It was a pleasure having you here on the show. I enjoyed the conversation. Great to have you.
Thank you so much. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. See you next time.